you're not going to really get killed, but the sense of danger is there. It's like watching a scary movie, I guess, but you're in it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm super stoked about today. We're bringing back Rokas Leo, who was on the show, I want to say episode 144. And that was a long time ago. And over the last couple of days, I've been watching one of the coolest things I've ever seen, which is the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship. Now, we're going to talk about your background. We're going to talk about how you did this. But first, for the people who haven't seen it or seen any part of it, we're going to spoiler the hell out of it. That they want to just accept my endorsement and start watching it and then come back to this, great. Can you just describe what the Self-Defense Championship, the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship was?
Yeah, definitely. So the brief description is there's 6 martial arts YouTubers / martial arts experts who are put together against each other in various self-defense challenges. And now the crazy part is, we can go into depth later into that, but many people are like, how can you make a championship out of self-defense? Championship is not a championship, but then still you can assess people's performance. And so we put all the participants, including myself, I was one of the participants, we put them in various self-defense challenges, such as fighting in a bus or escaping a warehouse full of knife attackers. And whoever does better or best gets more scores, and we see who's the winner and who does best.
So who were the 6 YouTubers? It was yourself?
Yes, I was participant / host, and just already to break away my curse, I did not know all the information of the challenges consciously, so I would be a fair participant, but I was hosting at the same time. Then besides myself, there's Jeff Chan, who's a professional MMA shredded, also known as. He's professional MMA fighter, a well-known YouTube martial artist. Then we had Icy Mike, who is also a YouTube guy. And the cool thing about him, he's now a kickboxing coach, but he has the former background of a police officer, and he was on the SWAT team. So it was fascinating to see how he does in various challenges. Then we had Ramsey Dewey. Again, pretty much all of us were YouTube guys, so that goes without saying now. But Ramsey, he used to be a professional MMA fighter, and now he's teaching classes in MMA classes in Shanghai, China, and he's like a walking encyclopedia, which is amazing. Then we had, and he also has background in various martial arts like Taekwondo, Sanda, so he's a fascinating guy. Then we had Sensei Seth, that's his nickname, so to speak. He is a karate black belt, and also he cross-trains in like everything, including sumo. He did really well in the United States National Sumo Championship, so he's pretty well-rounded. And we had Matt Clinton, who is, he had a growing successful channel on YouTube, but eventually he quit doing that. But we already knew him from then, where his channel was Reality Check Self-Defense, where he would put himself and kind of sacrifice himself in various ways of testing the reality and myths behind self-defense, like putting keys in his hands and trying to defend himself with it and hurting himself in the process, or having
I've done that. It seems like a really good idea. It's not.
That's what I heard. I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to try now. And he would have people kick him in the balls and see if that stops a fight. So he's a hardcore guy, but really nice guy. And he's also a kind of a self-defense practitioner. He had a background in Muay Thai, but his main background is training self-defense. So it was fascinating to see how he does in all of the scenarios and challenges as a self-defense background guy. So I think that's it. I don't think I missed anyone.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was a really fascinating lineup and cross-section of the sort of self-defense community. Now, let's address this. You can't test for self-defense. How on earth are you going to have a self-defense championship? As soon as you have a competition, all the magic pixie dust of self-defense goes out the window. I so much enjoyed the bus self-defense segment. So talk about that.
Sure.
But then I'll try to argue against it. I'll do more gouging.
Yeah, no, this is a great point, and we can keep coming back to that because it's an important one. And I see the logic behind it. At the same time, and I'll use the bus as an example, but so I was organizing the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship, or as we say, USDC, to make it simple, with the co-host Jeff Phillips, who's a self-defense instructor. He runs the facility where the whole thing took place, and we were discussing the same thing. But our point is, you cannot go 100%, like you cannot test everything, but you can still objectively see who does better. And has an upper hand in various cases. And so, for example, the bus, we rented a actual working bus and a lady. And actually, I regret this to today. My wife kept telling me, like, you should film the lady and show her. And I made the ultimate mistake. I did not listen to my wife. so there was actually an
ultimate marital disaster championship.
That was as well. There was an elderly or senior lady driving the bus. So it's too bad we didn't show it, because it's kind of funny, because we asked her to drive like crazy. Like, she would stop on the brakes and swirl and go to different sides and speed and stop. And we could feel it. Like, that was part of the challenge. And then we would have to fight each other, the participants, and we were geared up. We would have like helmets, mainly because this was a 5-day event and we had multiple challenges per day. And if somebody gets seriously hurt, that's it. He's out of the championship. So that wasn't really part of the question.
Even just a major cut. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So we wanted to minimize the damage, but still, for example, like Seth, again, you said we're going to have some spoilers, and so I won't be careful about them too much. So Sensei Seth, he's a big guy, and he had a American football training for many years. I think he played like almost like semi-professional. He has sumo background, so on top of his karate, and he had bigger weight than the rest of us. So he would just like put us and squeeze us in between the chairs and just keep bashing us. And it's like, yeah, I guess I could like try to gouge his eyes while I'm there squeezed and I can't move whatsoever. So at the same time, maybe not that much, or kicking it in the balls. Like there's so little space in the bus, and when you're cramped up, and especially when you're put in a bad position, it's like, you could argue like, oh, that would change things. At the same time, if somebody is really dominating you, it's hard to say it would. And no. let's say we agree that it could change things, but at the same time, there's Paul Sharp, a PhD black belt, former police officer. He's into like BJJ self-defense, and he told me, like, if you can dominate someone without eye gouging and kicking in the balls or biting, it's like that's already a huge advantage. And if you just add the eye gouging later, that's kind of just making things even better. But if you're winning under these conditions, you're probably going to do quite well in a self-defense situation too. At least that was our logic. Yeah.
No, I totally. I mean, obviously, if you're on the bottom and in a terrible position, and you try to eye gouge, it could work. Yeah. I don't know. I give a percentage, 1 in 10 times it could work, and by work, get the guy off of you.
Right.
But if it doesn't, you've just escalated it, and now the guy who's in the dominant position on top with gravity pinning you in a position, now he can eye gouge you at will. So yes, it's like a little wild card. It's like I don't know, holding a gun up to your own head with a revolver with 5 shots in it, and a gun up to his head with 1 shot in it, and pulling the triggers at the same time. It could work, but it's probably not going to.
Right. It's just, I guess we considered it, whether that's 100% true or not. It's a discussion to have, but I think we consider it, between our circle, we consider it as less percentage techniques. Yeah. Like, well, you're a jiu-jitsu master. I'm just like blue belt, but I like that concept in jiu-jitsu. It's like there are techniques which are like low percentage and high percentages. Like everyone pulls this off and it works all the time. And there are these techniques where it has a specific place, but it's like, I like to rely more on the high percentage techniques and not like focus too much on the low percentage. So same with the other things. And just to kind of give a better rep for USDC, there's a moment in episode 2 where we were attacked by multiple attackers, and Icy Mike, who's a smaller guy, and that's a huge disadvantage, as was proven by the series as well, as much as just logical. He was like grabbing, we all had like cups, but protective cups, but he was grabbing one of the bad guys like on the cup, and then the referee, Jeff Phillips, who's the Celtics guy, he's like, oh, like I remember the name. I think let's say it's Sam. It's like, hey Sam, you have to take like a 10-second break. He grabbed your balls. He didn't feel it even, but we were trying to make sure that that's respected at least to some degree. So yeah, we did our best.
It was really cool in that bus episode to see how just a bus swerving. I think forget who was fighting. But it totally reversed positions. One guy was on top, the other guy was on bottom, then the bus swerved one direction. Yeah. And it basically was a free, like an Uno reverse card played at random.
I understand that. I really like that kind of use of imagery with Uno, because that's, as you said, that's exactly what happened. And it happened a number of times, but the most clear one was Icy Mike versus Jeff Chan. Again, Jeff Chan, actually, they're similar size, to be honest, but still, Jeff Chan is a pro fighter and he's younger. So he was dominating the fight, and he had Mike pushed on the seats. But then that's exactly what happened. The bus swerved, and then it pushed Jeff back to the other side and gave momentum for Mike to jump out from the chair, and then he had a fighting chance. If that wouldn't have happened, it would have been completely different. But yeah, it's interesting how that dynamic can just completely change the dynamics.
In many of the scenarios, and not just the bus, but anytime that there was a fight, and we should talk about this because not all scenarios ended up in fights, which I thought, I did not see that coming, and that was kudos to you. You actually probably saved some lives there, and we'll talk about that later. But fighting in a three-dimensional environment where there's walls and tables and chairs and seats and elevation changes, it's amazing how often it went at least to the clinch and often to the ground. Like the two people standing back, jab. Okay, I'm gonna feel you out, and I'm gonna see that when you flinch this way when you throw the jab. Like all this sort of sciencey boxing, even sciencey MMA, just out the window. It's just charge, clinch, try to dominate.
Right. Yeah.
Mostly, and it was very, very, very hard to stop the clinch and to stop the smush, the smushing up against the various terrain objects.
Yeah, 100%. And I have to be fair and say something to that, because I'm on your side. I think that's exactly what happened. We did get a little bit of criticism, and I think there's truth in that to some degree, that we had the protective gear, and there's an argument that the competition did not favor strikers. And I think it's fair to give like a lip
How does
service.
the competition not favor? I mean, obviously, you weren't going quite 100%. You were going sort of 70-80%.
In most of the challenges, we went around 70%. There were some cases, like the final challenge, we were given permission to go 100%. That really didn't change things. It changed things in some ways, but wasn't like a game changer. In others, we were around 70-80%, but yeah, it wasn't 100. At the same time, we had like padding, we had helmets, and the argument is that it's harder to knock a person out. So you don't want to, like, you subconsciously or consciously don't want to rely on that as much. At the same time, I want to also debunk that, because again, Jeff Phillips and I, we were talking about that. Like, if you look at Kudo fights, which Kudo is, it's a fascinating martial art, but it's
that a cheese grater helmet that they wear, the plastic bubble with the little holes?
Well, I would call it like space helmet. Like they have like protective, and so Kudo is a mix between karate, like boxing, and judo essentially, and a bit of BJJ. And they use elbows, knees. They have like their gloves are super thin. It's only for the protection of the knuckles.
Okay.
And but they're well known for using helmets in their competition, although they're going quite hardcore. And knockouts happen fairly often, like maybe not as often as it would without the helmets, but some people are like, oh, it's impossible to knock a person out with like a space helmet. It's not. It's possible. So yeah, I feel like it's my responsibility to say that maybe there was a slight percentage which favored a grappler, but at the same time, not entirely. No. So having said that, again, I'm mostly on your side, and I agree that just things would often go to the clinch, especially like if a knockout shot didn't happen. It's like it seems like there's a natural desire to just go closer, especially if there's a size difference, there's a desire to grab the person, to control the person, or maybe there's like again, I'm just brainstorming and thinking out loud and referring to my experience. Maybe there's also a safety mechanism where you're like, you just want to get close and hug and then think, because there's so much stress, adrenaline, and grappling is so much more tactile. It just feels like you're more in control versus like there's a distance and you're trying to do something in the distance, especially if the other person wants to close the distance and you want to keep striking. So hard to do. It's like so hard to do. It's there's a high percentage chance that it's going to end up in a clinch. So personally, yeah, it was interesting for me to see in the championship that clinching was super common and grappling was super common, just reminding me and everyone, I guess, that striking alone in self-defense could be not the only and best solution.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was the protective equipment that you were wearing? You were wearing helmets, chest guards, gloves, fingerless gloves?
Yes, like I guess MMA gloves. And then we had cups, although Seth, turns out he didn't use his and he got kicked in the balls hard in the last episode. So I'm like, why did you not use the cup?
Why did he not? Why did he not?
I don't remember his explanation, like a clear explanation. I think he like prefers movement without it. I mean, he's a kicking guy, so maybe that's the reason. But it was crazy for him not to do it, and he got specifically kicked in the balls. So he had to suffer the consequences, although it did not stop the fight. Although we had this whole discussion, like some of it is on record, but in reality, it was like a 20-minute discussion where like, was that a game changer? Should we give scores to the person who kicked? But so the person didn't kick 100%, but it was still a pretty heavy kick. But then Seth continued to fight. And then after the fight, he was just like lying on the ground for like 10 minutes. So it's a whole discussion. It's tricky. But protective gear, we had shin guards, and the rest they mentioned. So helmet, chest pads, cup, shin guards, glove, MMA gloves. Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
With that much gear on, that adds a whole nother dimension. It'd be like fighting in, board shorts versus fighting in a 3-piece suit with a tie. Was there an agreement to not like try and turn the guy's helmet around backwards or grab onto the chest guard and use that as an anchor?
You're the first person to ask me, and I just realized that's genius. Why would I not do that? It's like, it's just, honestly, that did not come across through my mind. Maybe because as an organizer, I didn't want to like be like cheaty in terms of the rules, but it didn't even come to my mind to do that. But it's a brilliant idea. I think hopefully season 2 participants are not listening to this and thinking, oh, we're going to have to tell them, please don't turn the helmet. But we didn't have the discussion. I guess it was kind of, all of us were nice guys. So maybe it just didn't come to anyone's mind, because like we were even during in between the championship filming, some of us did collabs with each other, like YouTube videos, and Seth tested out illegal MMA rules, and they tested like grabbing gloves, and I wasn't part of that filming. I was taking care of other stuff in the meantime, but they told me that video is online, by the way. They told me that grabbing gloves really like gives you like an advantage. Like it sucks when somebody grabs your gloves. So we weren't really doing that, but we didn't even discuss that. So I guess it just comes to us being nice guys. But the equipment still came into play. Obviously, it was nice to be a little bit more protected because there was so much damage through the 5 days. But like in the bus, for example, it's already tight. And when you're in between the chairs, and we had moments where the equipment was kind of making us struggle a bit more with how we move, or in grappling. Like I pulled off a couple of submissions during the whole championship, and I was given like compliments from the other guys, like, hey, you pulled it off with the equipment, which I think it's true. It's harder because the helmet gets in your way even when you're trying to do a rear naked choke or your own like shin guards. But at the same time, I think one part is we were all equal in that matter. Like we all had the same gear. So it's it's kind of a difficult debate too. Like we had a couple of moments where somebody's helmet turned around, but then at the same time, it happened only twice through the whole championship. But then it only happened to a couple of guys and to no one else. And it's like, it's a debate, but I wonder if part of that skill is as well, like, well, you're not going to wear a helmet in real life most of the times, but then it's also part of your responsibility to be mindful to not get in a position where your helmet is going to twist. So the fact that no one else had that, I think it's preventable. We all have the same gear, so it kind of equalized us in that regard. And the fact that we still managed to do what we managed to do with the gear, I think it's just talks to like, well, that's your skill set. It's like kudos to you because you were still able to do your stuff with the gear. So, but we had a little bit of complaints from one of the participants about the gear, but most guys were fine with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can say yes. You're very, very unlikely, but not impossible to be attacked by somebody who's wearing a helmet, gloves, and a chest guard. Although I have seen people walk, probably mentally ill people walking around wearing MMA gloves on the street. Like, I think it was probably like a self-protection mechanism. Like, I'm crazy and I've got these gloves, so I must train UFC and don't fuck with me. But on the other hand, I mean, on any given day, you might be carrying a backpack. You might have I'm Canadian, so I vote for the second season to include like a giant parka, snow pants, and snow boots. You're trying to fight like
I like that
Marshmallow Man, and I don't know, a satchel, a backpack, a fanny pack, some kind of strapping, because I've done a little bit of that training, not enough, where you're trying to wear street clothes or you're trying to mix, even just wearing your gi and including striking.
Yeah.
Complete, like all of a sudden, Spider Guard seems like a really good idea.
Yeah,
you'd never use Spider Guard in the street. You would if the guy's wearing a jacket. You could tie, just like grabbing the gloves. Which you discovered. So.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Like heavy clothes, like a leather jacket, I imagine. And when I was super into self-defense, I would think about everything that's possible. And I guess one of the things I thought about is you can get attacked by a guy with the helmet. Like, it's, again, not likely, but let's say a motorcycle guy is wearing a helmet and he attacks you. Because the thing I disliked, and I like the opposite, is sometimes we like rules. It's like, somebody grabs you, you strike them to the nose. It's like, great. And then let's imagine a guy attacks you with a nice motorcycle helmet. It's like, well, how do you strike his nose then? How do you go about that? And again, low percentage chance that it's going to happen. Low percentage chance you're going to get attacked altogether. But it's good to consider those things and be ready for that. So yeah, we weren't going into that side in the self-defense championship where it's like, let's imagine we all wore helmets and this is real life. We were mindful that this is still like, it's still a show, it's still a championship, but that doesn't mean you can't do most of the things you would still be able to do. So yeah, that's what I think.
Now you had a scoring system where each event you could score 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 points.
Yeah.
How do you feel that point system ended up working, and did it sort of genuinely reflect performance in the scenario, both mental and physical?
There's a couple of things I have to say there. So one is we did get a little bit into trouble for the scoring from because people are passionate about the show. I was happy that a lot of people really liked it, but also that meant
no matter what you do, you're going to get criticism.
True.
There's no creating. Somebody hated Michelangelo's Sistine ceiling. They came in and said, "This is bullshit." They hated the David when the Mona Lisa was painted, not by Michelangelo.
Yeah.
Somebody said, "Leonardo, this is junk." Like, you're going to have to embrace criticism if you want to play in this. And it's almost if you're not getting any criticism, then you're simply not reaching enough people.
True. I like that. I think at the same time, the criticism that hurts is where you see some truth in it. You're like, yeah, maybe. And sometimes we over exaggerate the truth behind criticism. I think that happens too because we're self-critical, many of us. But I think the truth is that when we were organizing season 1, Jeff Phillips and I, we did do our best to assess all the challenges correctly and fairly, but we did not stress it to like 120%. We thought, well, what matters most is the experience, is the educational aspect that happens. And then we release the series and everyone is super picky. It's like, because also they're invested in the participants. They want them to win. They're like, oh, this guy should have won half point. And we're like, realize, whoa, in season 2, we're going to have to be super diligent about the scoring, because this time we're like, yeah, it's fair to say that this guy won. It's like, okay, but we didn't go to like, but what about that tiny detail? So that's something for us to improve upon. But at the same time, I think the reality was reflected fairly well. Again, it's hard to judge those challenges. What helped is that Jeff Phillips does these challenges or championships for his students yearly. Like it's his format in his school, and that's where we started off, and we adjusted things to make it more entertaining or more adjusted to like pro fighters, etc. But he's been doing it for years, so he has a grasp on what works, what doesn't work, how to judge it, and there's always subjectivity in it. Like we had to sit down and be like, well, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense. Somebody else would come in and they would maybe think the opposite. We also did our best, though, to include multiple people in the judging so that we would hear different opinions and we would see a majority. So we did our best not to be biased. And I think in the end, the result was successful because you could still see who dominates in one of the fights, or it's sometimes fairly clear. Like, for example, like there's the warehouse escaping of knife attackers. It's like,
can we ruin this for the people who haven't stopped watching it? Can you give? Sure. This is a pretty in-depth scenario, really.
Yeah. So, do you want me to talk about what happened there? Like what it is?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So very simple. There's a warehouse. There's 2 teams of 3 guys. So 3 guys run into 3 participants run into the facility at the same time. And then we have 5 or 6 guys coming in with markers, which represent knives. And our goal is to hide for 5 minutes before we escape the warehouse. And because our point was that hiding actually can be a very valuable self-defense skill. If nobody finds you, then you're not in trouble. And only after those 5 minutes of successfully hiding, there's multiple doors that you can escape through while the guys are hunting you. And first of all, it's super scary. It's so scary. It's just, it's simulated,
really?
Yeah, it's like I had that experience. Jeff Chan, it was funny because I was interviewing all the guys about their reflections of their experience. And in many of the challenges, the guys were like, "Whoa, this was so like difficult and so exhausting, the hardest thing ever done." And the ones which were expressed or described like that, Jeff Chan came in and said, "Oh, this was the most fun." And I'm like, "Really? Was that how you described that terrible, challenging experience?" But even still, the warehouse, he said his heart was just like pounding, and he was like, "There's adrenaline running." We were all like, honestly scared because just of how you feel, because essentially you know when you're gonna get killed. You're not gonna really get killed, but the sense of danger is there. It's like watching a scary movie, I guess, but you're in it. Yeah. So it was intense. It was super intense. But without spoiling everything, pretty much all of us did terrible. Like most of us died, and the reason for that is it's just so much harder than you think. But also, I think my point with the scoring was we all died. So it's like, obviously we get 0 points. It's like, we died. I mean, there were debates. We could like give extra points for escaping the building and not reaching the final point. We'll talk about it for season 2. But it's like, my point is, if you die, or like in episode 6, we were locked with a knife attacker in a small room and had to survive 20 seconds, which were super long. Those 20 seconds are so long. And I was counting cuts in the editing process. And even being there myself as a participant, when I was counting every stab, I was shocked. I was like, these are more stabs than seconds. And again, there's debates like, there's the knife angle, and sometimes you could get stabbed. There's all of that. But still, if somebody gets, like, we had cases where somebody would get stabbed 4 times, period. And then we would assess if it's like lethal or not. But in other cases, somebody gets stabbed like 20 times. So it's like, I guess there's a chance you could survive that, but it's very minor. But when you score it, if somebody gets stabbed 20 times and somebody gets stabbed 3 times, it's very easy to say that this guy did better. So, I could talk about this forever, but I think the judging and the scoring and the winners who won and who got which place, I think it was all justified.
One thing I wanted to ask you while watching the warehouse knife attack scenario was that both teams went in, both teams had a plan, and both plans immediately fell apart for both teams. Do you think that's just because it's a bunch of individualistic martial artists and they're like not a bunch of cops or firefighters or who are used to working in a team? Or why do you think that? That was my hypothesis.
Yeah,
I'm eager for you to.
That's a very good question. I love you bring that, and you're like a firefighter as well. Like it's like so. I imagine you have a good sense of how well your teamwork works.
Lots of things that firefighters do poorly, but the one thing they tend to do very well is teamwork, and that's because you spend all day doing everything in a team. Like you cook lunch, you go. If you can shop around the guy who can't eat onions, the guy who doesn't eat any meat, and the guy who is allergic to something else, and you can come up with a lunch plan, that's a big team effort. And then it's to checking the truck or like dividing labor. So it's pretty inculcated in the culture. I don't know by design, but certainly by function.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to think this. Yeah, I mean, this is just Homer pride. Yeah. But I'd like to think that firefighters work pretty naturally in a team. Whether they follow plans or not, that's good teamwork. I'm not so sure about following plans. Anyhow, enough about me. I want to know about knives and attackers and teams.
Yeah, and it's a really fascinating question you ask, and it makes me reflect as well. I think probably there's truth to your words. I'm not thinking that's the only answer to that, because I think we have to take into account the stress and the lack of time, because we had only a limited amount of time to hide. The environment was unknown. And again, as I said, like the adrenaline, the fear and stress reaction was really there. And I think that messes up your ability to work together. But I wouldn't blame that only. I think we had a tendency to be more individualistic, at least some of us. Like personally, I tend to be very like, I guess my Aikido background comes into it, like very much like listening and feeling things and being kind of part of the team. And I was in my team, I was leading into it. I was like, hey, let's form a team. Let's do this. But then one of our members, I can say specifically, so I see Mike, he seemed to be more individualistic in that regard. And he was telling us that, well, in my experience, when we have a plan of the situations, it just tends to fall apart. So let's not even make one. And I was like, I guess so. But then I went away. I listened to him. I hid by myself. And then he still formed a plan with Sensei Seth, and the plan worked brilliantly. So I'm like, again, I'm not sure what to think about that, but the stress was probably there as well. The other team, it was like they had a very specific plan, and it's just as soon as they had to execute it, they just went into different places. And I don't even know like exactly why that happened. I don't think I heard like a clear explanation, but I think it was just in the heat of the moment. It's just like probably I imagine everyone was thinking about themselves, like, how do you survive this? And maybe we're talking about, because we weren't judged as a team either. It was individual. You could choose whether to team up, but if everyone survives, you don't get extra points. So everyone is nice, but I guess still everyone was focused on how do I survive? And then you talk about a plan, but at the end it's like, okay, so what was my plan? So maybe that, but it's a really great insight.
Yeah, there's that old, there are two quotes I love that basically say the same thing. One is that by the a Prussian general, that no plan of action survives contact with the enemy. But then there's just a simpler old Jewish one that is, man makes plans and God laughs.
Yeah.
So, how many times have you had your perfect plan completely fall apart?
Yeah, that also came, and that was actually part of our desire to show that usually is the case in self-defense. And I'm not as knowledgeable as my partner, Jeff Phillips, in it, but he spends years and years researching it and looking into it, like looking at CCTV footage, etc. So he has even more knowledge of that. But our point together was that usually your plan in self-defense rarely works, and we wanted to show that, or at least to test that, because part of the whole championship was experimenting and seeing if we're right or wrong. And in many cases, yeah, the plans, like you have a plan, like, okay, this guy's going to come in, I'm going to kick him like that, and then I'm going to do this, and then the kick fails, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to have to improvise. So I think in the end, a lot of it, we try to surprise the participants many times. So even myself, I came in, I'm like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And then you don't have a chance to plan. But in other cases, when you do, often the plan falls apart. Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked how not every scenario, that the answer not in every scenario was to fight. There's like too many negatives. You set it up that sometimes the right thing to do in a scenario was not to fight, and that you had to assess the situation and decide, do I fight? Do I not fight? If you avoided the situation where everyone has a hammer and everything problem looks like a nail, they had to decide if they're going to use the hammer or the screwdriver or the wrench or whatever. That was very, very well done.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, though. A lot of that goes to Jeff Phillips, but yeah, thank you. So yeah, there were.
Did you know that those types of scenarios were coming?
Me personally, as the participant / host, I did not know specifically. No,
slash producer / fundraiser.
Yeah, right. Editor. It's I would be a lot in the credits. So
funny. You should roll the credits.
Yeah. It's like
every category.
For sure. So there were two main instances where not fighting was an option. And one was like a whole list of scenarios. But the first one that we bumped into was it's a challenge where we have our eyes closed and we know we're going to get attacked. But then as soon as we hear a noise or we feel contact, we open our eyes up and then we just have to immediately decide what we do. And most of it was physical. It was like a guy with a bat. So there was no consideration of, hey, maybe you want to play baseball, try to like de-escalate it. That wasn't really part of the game. But in one of the attackers there, we had a guy coming in. You feel like something by your throat and you open your eyes and you see there's a guy with the knife. Now we also had like mouth guards and helmets, and the guy says, give me your money or something like that. And it's even hard to hear, but you're also stressed and you're trying to realize what's happening. So not all of us even heard that, but the clear thing is that you have a knife next to your throat and he's not attacking you. Now, some of us went straight into fighting, and maybe that's part of the fact that we were fighting, and then you think like that's the solution. But the interesting part is that not all of us did that nevertheless. And in my experience, when I saw the knife, my first instinct was, okay, I'm going to hit him. But then I talked to so many martial arts or self-defense experts who constantly would tell me, if somebody's holding a knife in front of you, probably they're not intending to use it. And if you can give your valuables, just give your valuables. You can always buy them back. I had dozens of those conversations, and my brain luckily kicked in, and I was like, wait. I've spoken about this. I told the same to many people. I cannot screw this up. Like, I don't know if this is a valid, like approach. I don't know if I'm going to survive, but I cannot start fighting and then show to everyone that, I don't walk my talk. So I'm like hesitant about it, but I'm like, even though I first wanted to punch, I decided not to punch. I'm like, hey, it's okay. Take my wallet, imaginary wallet that is. And I'm looking at the referee. I'm looking at the attacker. Is this okay? Am I going to survive? I'm going to have to fight. And he takes the imaginary wallet and walks in. I'm like, yes, that was the right solution. And it was not expected that we don't fight. And if you fight, you get less points. Fighting is an option, but you would definitely be encouraged. You definitely get points for surviving that scenario, because the attacker's intention was not to kill. It was just to take away your money.
Yeah. I mean, the other knife scenarios, I think, demonstrated pretty convincingly that even if you've got 10, 15, 20 years of training and you're going against a determined attacker who kind of knows how to handle a knife, the odds of this going well for you are very, 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 very small if you don't get your hands on. I mean, it'd be interesting to rerun that scenario in a more complex environment where there's backpacks and other improvised weapons around. I think that you might get a different result, but empty-handed against a knife when the guy knows about changing hands, about stripping grips, about sewing machining. Good luck. Like
Yeah, 100%. And without spoiling too much of season 2, and the challenges are not set in stone yet, but we are considering to expand that in what you mentioned, like include various elements, different environments, because in most cases, you won't get attacked in a like bare room where nothing is there, and then you cannot use anything. Like if somebody would attack me with a knife, my first desired solution would be to grab something or use. So we're already looking into including that in season 2, but in season 1, one of the points, and Jeff Phillips especially wanted to bring that point, because there's so many instructors who are like, hey, use this knife, defense, attack, or like defense technique. This is like, you're going to survive 100% using this. There's so many of those people, and including my own Aikido background, we had knife defense techniques, which I now know they're like miserable. But there's so much belief in knife defense, so we wanted to create conditions. It's almost like Kobayashi Maru, the Star Trek no-win situation. We did not go in a way where like nobody's going to get points, period. We were like, okay, we're going to put them in a position, or put us in a position where
it was pretty realistic for a plain room with no additional,
where
you can't escape and where you can't use environment.
Right. So there was a chance to get points, but we were already clear, because again, Jeff Phillips does this all the time with his students. Almost no one ever gets a point, and the point for that is to show that that's the reality. If you get attacked with a knife in these conditions, surviving rate is very low. Obviously, it depends on who's the attacker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But still, your chances are going to go significantly down of going out unscratched or alive. And we wanted to show that. So that's one of the reasons why there was nothing in the room. Well, there was this one object in one of the scenarios, and nobody managed to use that because it was kind of a weird, fluffy object. But which was easy to kick out of the way. Anyway, point is, we wanted essentially to show that this is not going to go great. And I think the challenge really portrayed that.
Yeah. The two examples that I always go to for, there was a case in the States where a man got attacked by his wife or girlfriend. Maybe it was his wife who found out he had a girlfriend, or his girlfriend who found out that he had a wife. I'm not sure which scenario it was. With a knife, and he managed to survive because he grabbed like a plastic lightsaber child's toy and managed to use that to block the knife.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
And then there was footage of a stabbing in, I think, the UK, where somebody used a backpack to pick off almost all the shots. And okay, these are examples of, not quite empty hand versus knife, but not knife versus knife.
To bounce off of that, I think for the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship, obviously part of our goal is to be entertaining, to be interesting, so that people would watch it and enjoy it, because it's still a YouTube series. But at the same time, our vision and mission definitely was also to educate people and to show, and even for ourselves. Like in season 2, I'm very excited because we'll have more experiments going. Like in season 1, everyone was fairly well-rounded, and some differences in size and height, but for season 2 we wanted to push the levels higher so that there would be a bigger gap between fighting experience, size, background, and obviously the scenarios as well, the challenges, so that we had ideas of what's going to happen, but we were constantly either surprised or we're ready to be surprised, because we wanted to honestly, not to prove our point, but we wanted to honestly test like a laboratory to see what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. And part of that is, again, the educational aspect, so that whoever watches the series, like especially like the knife defense stuff and the scenarios as well, that would provoke the person to think about it and consider various options and maybe to apply it. Because personally, I like to say, even though I'm not a self-defense expert, I like to consider that like majority of self-defense is theoretical knowledge, just knowing how to de-escalate, knowing how to not go where at what time. And if you have that knowledge, like if you know that when somebody's putting a knife, that doesn't mean that he's not going to use it, period. But knowing that giving away your money is a valid option. Like Ramsey Dewey, he said he actually went through that like multiple times when he was in Argentina in the slums. he actually used that method multiple times. That's why he used it in the episode. But then we have these hardcore fighters and martial arts guys who train all the time. Like somebody holds a knife, you punch them in the head, that may kill them, and all they need is to hear that you don't have to do that. So we were hoping that the series will provoke that mentality.
Yeah, I think when I was saying you may have saved some lives, that's specifically well, that and also the I don't want to there's a couple other de-escalation ones that were just brilliant, and that's all I'm gonna say.
It's a good teaser.
I do want to get to season 2, but first I want to ask, if you knew in advance every challenge that was coming up in season 1, you could go back in time and you could have 6 months to prepare for it, how would you have prepared differently?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Guess the de-escalation ones, that's fairly easy, but the physical ones where you're actually standing and swinging at somebody or trying to defend against a knife, or how would you have tried to gain 30 pounds?
Actually, yes. No, I think that's a big one. And I was trying to remember, okay, so what were my main takeaways where I'm like, I would do this, I would do that. A lot of that would actually be size and strength. We all came in, we're all from like season 1 participants, we're all from kind of the same family of YouTubers, martial arts YouTubers who are trying to be critical about martial arts in one way or another. Okay. And so we all came in knowing that size and strength matter, unlike some martial arts, like famously Aikido claims like, no, it's not size and strength, it's all about technique. And it's like Jiu-Jitsu proves that technique can surpass size, but it still matters. Like UFC has, so we all came in knowing that size and strength matter, but we all came out discussing like, whoa, it matters even more than we thought. And that's, again, we'll get to season 2 later, but that's why I'm excited to see how much it matters. But after, I was like thinking like, yeah, I was neglecting to some degree my like physical, what's the thing called, like strength and conditioning. I was doing it, but I was not like super into it. But now I'm much more respecting it. I'm thinking like, okay, I already know martial arts to some degree. Like, I can fight with amateur fighters, roll with jiu-jitsu, blue belts, whatever. And these guys, they already would defeat most of the guys in a fight. But if I'm going to be smaller and physically less strong, that will still lower my chances significantly in a fight. And also, obviously, there's also too the intimidation level. Like if you're bigger, less people will find you attractive to attack. But that's definitely a big one. There's also the scenarios where, again, without spoiling, my big lesson was, I guess part of that is like, oh, I've done this before, so I now know, but I just didn't think about it. And the big takeaway was that you don't always have to go and try to help people. And this is, again, debatable, based on, our moral ethics, etc. But I think it's a good point that I did not think as much about. So that's Jeff Phillips' point, that if you see a weird situation, some of us are nice people, including myself, and we're like, I just need to step in there, I need to help. But the question is, do you really need to risk your life? Or maybe it's better to go and call someone who has the right equipment for that, the right backup, and that's their responsibility to do it. So again, there's some debate there, but that was a big takeaway for me. Like, you don't have to always include yourself and involve yourself. And other than that,
how did endurance play into it? Because some of the scenarios ended up went on for a long time and ended up including a lot of running.
Yeah.
There's size and strength, and then there's cardiovascular endurance. Of course, and it would depend on the scenario. If you had a scenario where first you have to chase this guy who's running away with your baby and he's got a quarter-mile head start, at that point, the lighter, faster guy who runs 10Ks would do better than Sensei Seth, who I'm assuming isn't a very good long-distance runner.
Actually, this is besides the point, but actually Seth is surprisingly fit because he used to do like the NFL thing, the American football.
That's why I said long distance runner.
Yeah, true. You're right. Maybe you're right. Anyway, beside the point. So yes, endurance. So for me, I was lucky because I had a couple of MMA fights, amateur MMA fights before, and mainly in my first fight, I did a mistake where I went all out in the first round and then suffered because of it. So I had this ingrained in my mind, like, and I know like there's going to be 5 days, there's going to be a lot of challenges, and I already knew that if you're going to get spent, then you're not going to be able to do anything. Like, I think there's a famous phrase that fatigue makes cowards out of champions. And so I was very mindful and conscious about that to preserve my energy. And it worked really well for me in regards to the championship, because I managed to go through some of the challenges where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do the next one. On the same hand, Jeff Chan, he's like a cardio machine beast. I don't know what he's named from, but he was also like, he was lifting weights in between challenges. So he's crazy. but so he didn't have a problem there too. But the other guys, at least a couple of them, were significantly suffering because of the endurance problem. And I think a lot of that was because, especially in episode 2, where we go through 6 different physical scenarios, the guys who struggled in the first couple and got burned out, essentially they were barely capable of doing anything anymore in the later stages, and they also even suffered in like future challenges. So again, that's a very specific scenario, different attacks. But if you put that into self-defense perspective, and the same can happen, in a real life situation. If you are fighting for a long time with, let's say, a big guy, and you exhaust yourself, the series does show that your chances will drop significantly of coming out without too much damage. So yeah, I think endurance definitely plays a part. I was just lucky that I didn't get spent exhausted as much as I could. Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about season 2. Do you have participants lined up, and how far are you out from filming?
Yeah, so we have a specific filming date, because the facility where we're filming it is getting demolished at the end of the year. So we were actually forced to film season 2 earlier than expected, because I wanted to take a break after season 1. I not only was I a participant and organizer, which was super demanding, but also I did all the editing, which I was trying to be a perfectionist about it. So I was like, for 3 months, I was just editing and doing nothing else. It was terrible. I hated my life. But the series is the show is now what it is. But so I wanted to take a break after that, and then I get a call from Jeff Phillips, and he's like, "We have to do it early this year because we have this situation." I'm like, "Damn it!" So we had to really push for it, and luckily we had the successful crowdfunding. People can still contribute and see the show earlier because of it. But one way or another, we had a successful crowdfunding, and I already have all the participants lined up, and we already have, by now, it's the last buying happened just lately, but now all the participants have flight tickets. We have the facilities where they're going to live, that's rented. So it's happening for sure. The dates are again chosen, and the participants. So I'm not going to be a participant this time, because I decided to fully commit to producing and directing, because it was hard to, because I couldn't know exactly what's going to happen, and I still had to say to the camera people hey, do this and do that, but I'm not sure what's going to happen exactly. Now I'm going to be fully in the loop, and I'm not going to be thinking about the next event, how it will perform. So it'll be easier to level up the production level. But so I'm not participating, so we have 6 spots for 6 different people, and the lineup that we got together. So pretty much all of them are actually exciting. But the first person that comes to my mind is UFC fighter Natan Levy. He's the only Israeli fighter in the UFC. He's been fighting in UFC for some years now. I think he won the Contender Series, and I believe that's how he got into UFC, and he had a number of successful fights. So he is going to be phenomenal to see, because UFC is kind of the end all be all of MMA, and it's doesn't get better than UFC. So it'll be fascinating to see, okay, so how does a UFC person, how will a UFC person do compared to others in these scenarios? So fascinating experiment in that regard. Then we have Ranton, who has a big YouTube channel, over 1 million subscribers, and his background is Shaolin Kung Fu. He lived in the Shaolin monastery for a while in China, and he's not a combat sports guy. He's well aware of that. that's why it was hard to convince him. He loves the series, he loves the show, so he really wanted to be there. But I was talking to him, and he's like, "I'm gonna get my ass kicked." I'm like, "Yeah, probably, but it's gonna be fascinating." That's good. Then eventually he signed up, so I'm really happy.
A salesman, I see.
Yeah, a little bit. No, but he also wanted to do it, so I'm really happy he's up for it, because he has some combat sports experience, but everybody, mysticizes and fantasizes about the Shaolin and Kung Fu. So it'd be great, like they're magical, and I'm sure the fanboys will be like, he's not a real Shaolin monk. Yeah, but then still, we will have this experiment where we'll see how a person with
if he wins, the fanboys will all of a sudden embrace him as their own.
Yeah, exactly, 100%, and I will love him too. I'll be happy if he wins. I'll be super stoked. But then again, we'll see. But it's going to be fascinating to see a traditional guy, because in season 1, I come from a traditional background. Seth comes from a traditional background. But then again, we do all these other things. Yeah. We're not really traditionalists. So I'm really happy we have like a pure traditionalist in our roster. Then we have karate nerd Jesse Enkamp, also sizable big YouTube channel.
Just a little bit of a following.
Yeah, like he's doing YouTube so well. I love what he does. So he is the thing is he's also trained in MMA. Like he's not hardcore MMA, but he had a couple of MMA fights. His brother's a pro MMA fighter, so he knows how to do MMA, but he's not super into it. So he still will mostly represent karate, which is again going to be fascinating. Plus Jesse, he's very strong. I think he trains more or less every day, like strength and conditioning. He has a great physique. I think that will come into play as well. And then we have a basketball player. Again, fascinating part. It's he has a TikTok following, but not in martial arts. And his main profession is professional basketball player. That's what he does. So
how big is he?
Damn. I don't have the numbers right now on me, but he's big.
I'm assuming giant.
He's giant. From what I know, like he's not like the biggest basketball player, but he's tall and he's big. He's like athletic. Okay. He's one of those. I didn't see him live, but from what I gather, he's like a bit of a bear, like he's not like a thin, tall guy. He's like a big, tall guy. So he's very athletic. And now he's training in the self-defense school where things take place. He's training like once or twice per week for the past couple of months. So by the competition, by the championship, he's going to have 6 months of a little bit of self-defense training. That's it. He has no more martial arts experience. So we're going to have an experience to see how a big athletic person with a minimal amount of self-defense training, how he does compared to UFC fighter, traditionalist. So I'm super excited about him and glad that he's on board. He's obviously also risking, because it's like I'm coming in, I know more or less what I'm gonna do, and I'm okay with it. He's gonna have to wing it, but I respect a lot him for joining us. And who am I missing? Jordan does jiu-jitsu. So I consider him, from what I see, like high level jiu-jitsu guy, like very knowledgeable.
That's right there. Yeah.
And he, as a producer, I have to say, unfortunately, he had a number of MMA fights. I think like 3 MMA fights, a Muay Thai fight, which all of them I think he won. So he's capable of striking, which is unfortunate, because I'd love to have like a pure jiu-jitsu guy. That would make the experiment even more interesting. But at the same time, he still is going to represent mainly jiu-jitsu.
See if Kron Gracie's available.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Fought in the UFC, but his striking.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wish that it's as crazy as it is to say that. I wish the striking wasn't there in Jordan, but it is. But he's not, not the best. He still probably is not the best striker in the roster. But still, having a jiu-jitsu black belt, because we didn't have any jiu-jitsu black belts in season 1. Jeff Chan just got his brown belt. Well, actually, Ramsey Dewey, he's essentially a black belt, but he is not officially because he's living in China. So maybe I take my words back, but he also does so many things at the same time. And we have Jordan, who's focused on jiu-jitsu. And I am forgetting someone, I think. Oh, yes, we have Jeff Chan coming back from season 1.
Okay.
So another professional fighter. So the the level,
Oh, wow.
it's like a big gap between levels, but at the same time in season 1, we were all kind of in the middle. I was actually the least experienced guy, but still we were all kind of like somewhat experienced. Jeff Chan was at the top of us in terms of experience because he's a professional fighter fighting every day, but then he's not like actively fighting right now in championships. So, but now we're going to have, UFC fighter, high level jiu-jitsu guy, Jeff Chan. So it's going to be a battle. Like Jeff said, he's concerned about, he's like, he says like, I'm not sure about my chances of winning this one. And he's a humble guy, so it makes sense for him to think that. But I can also see why he says that. So yeah.
How can people see this early? Like, when is it coming out, and how can people see it early?
Yeah, so it's going to take a while until it comes out.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah, thank you. So it will take some time for it to come out because for season 1, I did this colossal mistake of wanting to publish it as soon as I can because I was so excited about it. And so I came back. As soon as I came back, I took like a couple of days off, and then I sat down by my computer, and day by day, night by night, I was just editing and ignoring all my personal life, training, everything. And it still took me 3 months to deliver all 7 episodes, regardless that I just was not doing anything else. And I burned myself out. I hated my life at the end of it. So I do not want to repeat that mistake. So my plan is I may hire some help, but I feel I have a strong creative vision on how to produce it. And pretty much everybody loved the way this season 1 was produced and edited. So I wanted to maintain that. So I will still be probably the main editor. So, but this time I don't want to sacrifice my life. So I will probably have a balanced life and just edit and train and have a personal life. So I imagine it may be like at least 4 to 5 months until I will start publishing episodes. So if we were filming in November, and I'll be back at the end of the month, essentially December, beginning of December. So it's going to be like springtime, late springtime. So it's going to be a while. But the good thing about it, the early part, is that it's possible to see it early. And the early part means as soon as the episode is going to be ready, I will give access to the people who are part of that early access deal. So it will be much earlier.
Through GoFundMe.
Yes, exactly. That's for the Indiegogo, which which is they're all the same. But the crowdfunding officially is over. But there is a thing where if you successfully reach the goal, it's open for as long as somebody contributes. And after the last contribution, it's open for like I think 3 weeks or something. And if nobody donates for 3 weeks, then it's completely closed. And I think people keep finding it and dropping a little bit here, a little bit there. And if it's like, I think it's like $10 or something, the lowest tier. And if you contribute, you help the series obviously become as good as it can be because all the money is invested. Like nothing, like no money stays with me. Obviously, I may get something back later, but with season 2, everything we get is going to get invested in the series. And as our gratitude, express our gratitude to people who contributed, then you get to see the episode as soon as they're ready. Because most likely everyone else, I'll edit at least 5 episodes before I'll start releasing them. So it's going to be a while. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you search Indiegogo Ultimate Self-Defense Championship, you'll probably find it. If you search Rokas Leo on my site, you'll find it. I'm assuming the link is up on your social media. Yes?
Yeah, it's around, I think, on my channel. I kept trying to push it, not as much anymore, but it's it's
well,
not
there's
that
one
hard to
thing I
find.
know, like, you think this is a project that's going to come in on budget, Rokas?
So, I
you're
do
going
it.
to need, especially, if you start farming out the editing, which you should, actually, because it's a, yes, you have a vision, but it's also a form of hubris to think that I'm the only person who can meet my vision.
True.
Having gone through this myself.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the hard part is that the vision I want to have comes down to like high level editing. And that means expensive. It's like, I would not mind hiring some like, amateurs because they're not expensive. If I want someone to produce the level I want it to be produced, that's probably got to be a lot because there's so much footage to go through. But it's something I don't have to consider. Thank you for encouraging me to do that. I shouldn't sacrifice my life entirely.
You still have the final word. Okay. Yeah. There's so much we didn't get to, but we did cover a whole bunch of how you got to this crazy stage on episode 144. I can't wait to have you back early next year.
Thank you.
To help hopefully a little bit before that series launches. Thank you. I think it's a really valuable contribution to the community.
Thank you.
And it's tremendous fun at the same time. So awesome. Thank you. And how do people follow you as you're going through this? I don't know how busy you're going to be posting while you're actually doing the competition, but you've produced some very interesting stuff over the years.
Thank you.
From that.
Yeah, so everything is on my YouTube channel called Martial Arts Journey, and the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship gets like the main spot. So as soon as somebody enters, they're going to see a trailer on it and the list of episodes. So it's easy to find as long as they search for Martial Arts Journey on YouTube or the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship. It's still going to come up. There's no one else made anything named the same way. And I also have like an Instagram handle, which is Rokas Leo _ Martial Arts Journey. But I'm mostly using it when I'm producing the show. So when the show is going to be produced, filmed, people can go there and check it out. But otherwise, it's not worth it. So it's mainly Martial Arts Journey on YouTube.
All right, my friend. Take care. Good luck. And be ready. Be training, because you might have to jump in if somebody bails out at the last minute.
I also may be a bad guy, so I need to train.
Oh.